You know, we live in an age where basically any belief, anything you hold dear, can be challenged in a split second online. So how in the world do you defend something that's sacred to you without totally losing your cool? Well, today we're going to dive into a pretty fascinating playbook designed to do exactly that.
This phrase right here, this is the master key to the entire strategy we're about to unpack. It's this powerful metaphor for getting so lost in the tiny, distracting details, those are the gnats, that you completely miss the massive, important reality staring you right in the face, the camel.
So this guide calls itself a playbook, but its goal isn't what you might think. Seriously, it's not about winning arguments. It's about changing the entire game for believers who find themselves facing down some really tough questions about their faith.
And to really get this playbook, it helps to know who it was written for. It was specifically created for believing Latter-day Saints. It kind of acknowledges that, hey, the critiques of their church have gotten way more complex, and they're everywhere. The goal is to help them respond, but not with aggression, with clarity, and, some inner peace.
Okay, and this is where that whole metaphor just clicks into place. The main strategy is to stop getting bogged down in debating every single gnat, every little isolated historical fact or issue. Instead, the idea is to gently shift the conversation to the camel, which is the overall positive spiritual impact, the fruit of the faith in someone's life.
So how does this actually work when you're in a conversation? Well, the playbook starts from the inside out. Before you can even think about responding to someone else, you have to get a handle on your own internal state. This first section is all about that emotional prep work. This right here, this is the fundamental mindset shift. It's huge. Success isn't about scoring points or proving you're right. According to this playbook, a successful conversation is one where your response is calm, it's compassionate, and it truly represents your own core values. So how do you actually stay grounded when things get heated? The playbook offers 3 super practical steps. First, just pause and breathe. It sounds so simple, right? But it literally interrupts your body's fight or flight response. Second, use I language. It feels personal and honest, not like you're attacking them. And third, know your triggers. We all have them. Figure out which critiques really set you off and have a calm response ready to go.
All right, so once you've got your inner game under control, the playbook moves to the outer game, the actual conversation. This section is kind of like a cheat sheet, offering these frameworks for responding to some of the most common criticisms people hear.
And look, it doesn't shy away from the really direct hits. This is such a loaded term, right? It's designed to be provocative. So how does the playbook suggest someone handle that? And this is a perfect example of the core tactic. Instead of getting into a debate over the definition of the word cult, the suggested response is to reframe the entire conversation. You pivot away from a word that's all about control, and instead you talk about principles you actually value, like community service, deep study, and personal discipleship.
Here's another really challenging one, and it's rooted in some complex and painful history. The guide doesn't dodge accusations against past leaders. It tackles them head-on.
The framework here kind of has 2 parts. First, it advises you to just acknowledge the difficulty of the topic, not to make excuses for things that were wrong. And second, it pivots to a core theological belief of the faith, this idea of continuing revelation. This concept is presented as a sort of built-in mechanism for the church to correct itself and grow over time.
Okay, so now the playbook moves into what you might call the advanced territory. This section is all about tackling those really nuanced critiques that come up when you're having a deep dive discussion about history and doctrine.
This slide is perfect. It shows that gnat versus camel strategy in action with 2 really specific examples. For the Book of Abraham issue, the frame shifts from the translation process, that's the gnat, to the spiritual doctrines that came out of it, that's the camel. And for the church's finances, the conversation gets reframed from a critique of wealth to a discussion on wise stewardship, basically arguing the institution is just practicing the self-reliance it preaches to its members.
We've mentioned this term a few times, so let's just make sure we're on the same page. Continuing revelation is absolutely central to this playbook's logic. It's the belief that divine guidance isn't a one-time thing. It's an ongoing, progressive process. And this concept allows for change and correction, which becomes the explanation for a lot of historical and doctrinal shifts.
So, after all these tactics and frameworks, what does this all add up to? Well, the final part of the playbook moves beyond just tactics and gets into philosophy, summarizing its core view on the very nature of faith itself.
Now, this is a really fascinating distinction. The guide argues that faith isn't irrational, as in it's against reason. No, Instead, it suggests faith is trans-rational, that it works with reason, but it also goes beyond it, by incorporating spiritual experience as its own valid form of evidence and understanding.
And this slide just ties it all together so neatly. The whole strategy is built on these foundational ideas, that faith uses both logic and spiritual feeling, that your own personal experiences are a legitimate way of knowing something, that you should focus on the big picture results, the fruits, not just isolated fragments of history, and that through it all, the ultimate goal is always, always compassion.
And that really leaves us with a question that goes way beyond this one specific playbook, doesn't it? Whether we're talking about faith or politics or any topic we care deeply about, how can we train ourselves to step back from all the minor points of conflict, all those gnats, and learn to focus on the larger, more important truths, the camels? It's a real challenge for any meaningful conversation in the world we live in today.